What's up, buddy? How are you?
Yeah. What's going on, man? How you doing, dude?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Um, Finally, it took us, I don't know, what, 2 years to finally do the podcast?
I think, yeah, we initially talked about this. Yeah, it was probably late 2022. Then obviously things happen, and everything has its own timing. But we finally made it here, and I think we tried to do it in person for a little bit. But I mean,
Yeah,
with anything in person, it's just there's just so much going on, and we
yeah. The
we live far
realization of
apart like
trying
that.
to, of trying to be an amateur bodybuilder, building a coaching business, um, uh, me looking a full-time job, managing relationships and everything like that. It's just a lot. So,
Um,
but glad we able to finally sit down and talk. Let's go ahead and just introduce yourself, introduce your company, and I guess go ahead and dive into your background.
Perfect. So, my name is Ian Powell with Ian Powell Aesthetics. I have been personal training probably since I was 17 or 18, starting off just doing like YMCA stuff. And even actually before that, just having people. Back in the day, my parents bought me like a set when I was 14, 15, like a weight set, and I just kept it in the garage. And I remember one summer I'd always have people come out and just like two or three guys come out and they would train with me. And in that hot Texas summer in the garage. So I guess I probably started kind of teaching people how to like train stuff around there. Personal training for over a decade. Went to school at Texas A&M Corpus Christi and graduated with exercise physiology with emphasis in biomechanics. From there, my bachelor's degree. I have my National Academy of Sports Medicine certification as well. Um, and along with that, I have my RTS, my Registered Training Specialization certification, and J3U Level 1 certification. And I think the reason why, me and Logan started really kind of having that idea of bringing a podcast like this to light is because we both just really like education. Like we're both have an insatiable like amount of desire just to know more. Like we're always constantly listening and actively trying to do more things. And I think with coaching, it's something that like you can always level up. You never know enough. Like you think you know something, and then you do something, and then there's just levels to it. So
Yeah,
that's my introduction.
solid. So I'm Logan Schultz with Center Stage Aesthetics. Um, I started personal training in college. I don't know, at probably 19 years old. Um, Fell in love with bodybuilding at 16. Basically, I decided to quit football. Actually, let me rephrase that. I fell in love with bodybuilding as probably a 13 or 14-year old. Watching, let's see, it would have been Jay Cutler won the first Olympia that I would have watched.
Yep.
Um, but then fast forward to about 16 years old, I decided that I was going to quit football. And my defensive back coach sat down with me and said, if you quit football, you're going to get fat and lazy. And I've always been that kind of person that if you tell me I can't do something, I'm kind of gonna prove you wrong. And so I basically said, fuck off, for lack of a better terms. And I went and joined a gym.
Hell yeah.
Thankfully, my mom's office had a deal worked out with a local gym to where I got a free membership. So I started training just before, 16 years old. But once I was able to drive, I really started training. And um, fast forward, I didn't compete until 2018. So I was 25 years old. Started coaching probably 2020. I started taking on clients 2020, 2019, 2020, somewhere in there. Started taking clients on for free. Um, and that's really when I delved into learning as much as I could about nutrition. I'd already studied hormones and PEDs pretty extensively. Um, and so then I kind of delved down nutrition and then some functional health stuff and things of that nature. I don't have a ton of certifications behind my name. I don't have a degree. I never, I always struggled to sit in the classroom and learn things. I have a hard time listening to someone talk. um, Unless they have some bit of entertaining, aspect to their personality, right? So I've done most of my learning self-taught or taking classes from people that are much smarter than me, stuff like that. So, and experience really. So that's kind of where I am. Amateur bodybuilder. I've competed in 5 shows. We're prepping for nationals right now at 6 weeks out, and so just trying to continue down that path and continue growing. So I guess that's really it. So
I think
what got you into bodybuilding actually?
yeah, perfect. You talked a lot about kind of what brought you into bodybuilding, or I think we both started watching bodybuilding like really, really young. I think I started watching First Olympia when I was 10 years old, so that
Yeah,
I would have been 2004, 2005. That's probably
yeah,
my first Olympia I watched. There's a lot of things that kind of got me into bodybuilding. Obviously, I think one of the first ones is I was a really good athlete. I was very good at skill positions. Played baseball, played basketball. Was very good at doing those, but I was always extremely undersized, like very undersized. I grew up. I didn't really care too much about food, nutrition. I probably ate like one meal a day, and the
yeah,
rest was like snacks, like just like
yeah,
chips and shit like that. I just didn't really care that much about nutrition in that sense. And then I think I just got tired of always being like the smaller guy when I was like playing baseball. I was a good hitter, but I had no power, so I could get on base, but I couldn't really punch it into the outfield very much. Um, so I think that was probably my first initial driving factor of getting into bodybuilding. I was like, okay, I remember I went up to my dad and I was like, I want to get stronger. I was like, I don't know how to get stronger or how to get bigger. I don't know what to do. My dad was in the Air Force for a good while, and while he was in the Air Force, he got into working out and bodybuilding, and he had a book. Actually, I think I have it here. Actually, I do have it here. It was my first book I ever got into. It's called Keys to the Inner Universe by Bill Pearl, which Bill Pearl was a 1950s bodybuilder before Arnold's time. Kind of one of the people that brought in that Arnold was really motivated by with Reg Park and all that kind of stuff. So he showed me this book, and he got an autograph by him, and he said, "Just read this." So my dad didn't necessarily teach me anything, but he gave me the tool,
yeah.
and I have read that book probably inside and out like 3 or 4 times, and it's a big book. This boy.
Oh damn. Yeah,
This is
that's
a
a book.
this is a thick boy.
Yeah, it is.
And all these stuff are like very basic. Just a lot of
Yeah,
this is like an encyclopedia of just like training exercises and different kind of stuff like that. And
I'm I'm curious how much of that is applicable today versus like I mean you're talking about 1950s. I mean we're talking about 70 years ago.
mhm.
How much of that is still applicable today?
I think quite a bit of it. I think the training stuff is a little bit whack. It's a bit those guys. I feel like just had a shit ton of time. I
Yeah,
remember I used to run his programs. He had workouts that were like 70 sets, like 60 set
yeah.
days. Like those guys train very, very, very,
For
very high
hours.
volume
Yeah,
for hours. They trained like AM. They would train for 3 hours, and then they would go lunch or whatever like that, and they would train at the PM for whatever
mhm,
because these guys didn't have necessarily careers. These guys were literally just doing random
yeah,
jobs, like maybe at bars or wherever they were doing, and most of the day was just training. So a lot of his programs, I think, are dated. I think he has a lot of great information there. But I think one of the first things that I really remember about when I opened that book, it said one of the first 4 word was like PEDs. It was like, hey, like if you want to do bodybuilding, even when this book was made in the
that's
60s and
crazy.
70s, it
Yeah,
was
that's
like
crazy.
you are going to have to take some anabolic steroids at one point. Obviously, there's degrees to that, but I think that was kind of my first kind of initial, just like, oh shit, this is possible. Because before that, I always thought like I always looked up to athletes and stuff like that, but I never saw anybody that was like that
Yeah,
muscular. So I think that was my first introduction into kind of bodybuilding in a
that
sense.
world.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, the fact that you even had an introduction and the fact that you had some semblance of guidance, I had none. um, but um, to be honest, man, I don't remember what got me into bodybuilding. I don't remember. Um, like, a lot of people will say I picked up X, Y, and Z magazine. I just feel like it's kind of always been there, if that makes sense. Like it's always been around in my life.
Working out and stuff like that too. So when did you start working out?
So I was that kid. So when we were in elementary school, in PE, we used to have a physical activity portion of it where we did exercises or stretching or whatever, and there was a leader, and you did whatever that person did, right? And so you got to choose whether you did, push-ups or sit-ups, or you did stretching, or you did whatever it was, right? Most people chose to do the easier things that they could. I was that asshole that was making everybody do push-ups and sit-ups, right? Because I thoroughly enjoyed it actually, and I would do push-ups, sit-ups, and jumping jacks at home. Um, so like I already kind of liked pushing my body to those places at a young age. But I was that skinny kid. I mean, when I started training, I want to say I was 5'10", about 35. Um, I was always that skinny kid in school, and once I started to put on muscle tissue as people started to notice, and that kind of becomes an addicting thing.
Sure.
Um, so my introduction into bodybuilding is hard to pinpoint exactly. I do remember um, streaming the Olympia though, and it had to have been 2009, 2010, and I was watching a stream of somebody else that was like streaming it that they weren't supposed to,
Mhm.
and so I had to keep like finding new streams to continue
Oh, I hated
watching.
that. Yeah, that's the worst.
Yeah, yeah, because it
Watch where
kept,
you click.
yeah. So yeah, I mean that's kind of the whereabouts as to where I found out. Obviously, I learned about PEDs at some point in college. I mean, at some
Mhm.
point in high school, I knew what they were, right? So, um,
Whenever you were like, so obviously we both sound like we have the same background as far as being skinny kid. Obviously, you're taller than me, but when what weight did you graduate high school at? Do you remember?
160 pounds.
160.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't break 100 pounds until I was sophomore in high school.
Holy shit.
Yeah, and I was working. I mean, I worked out a little bit before then for sure. I was just I think a lot of that came down to just not eating. I just did
Yeah.
not eat.
Well, I'll be honest. My junior and senior year, I got into pro hormones,
I bet you did.
which now we're more like steroids, right?
Oh, especially back then. Yeah, not so much
Yeah,
now, but definitely
yeah.
back then.
Yeah, the stuff that we were able to buy from from GNC, excuse my language, from GNC back then were now steroids, right?
Yep.
Um, and each time I would do a cycle of one, I'd put on 10 pounds and I wouldn't lose it. I'd put it on and I would keep it. And so
Hyper responder.
I was like, I know for sure I'm going to use steroids one day, but I'm going to wait until I'm
Just fun.
done. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Because when I graduated high school probably like 130, 135. But like
okay,
people like were noticing me when I went 130, 135. Like, oh man, you're kind of like
oh yeah,
I was filling out the shirts that I was wearing, but I was
yeah.
not like by any
Well, I mean,
means
if you go from a
big.
sophomore and you break 100 pounds, I mean, you're talking about 30 pounds in 2 years. And that's essentially
Mhm.
what I did as well, right? 130 to 135 pounds, to 160 in 2 years. You start to get noticed, right? Because your body's changing quite a bit.
Yeah, you're
Uh,
not the small kid or the skinny guy or
yeah.
all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. All of a sudden, people start leaving you alone a little bit more, even though you're like 5'10", 160 pounds is still small.
It's still like a very small collegiate wide receiver.
Yeah. Right. So what exactly got you into coaching? I mean, obviously, you went and got your degree in personal training and with a minor in biomechanics, correct?
Emphasis in biomechanics. My
An
minor's in
emphasis, okay.
finance.
Okay, an
Yeah.
emphasis in biomechanics.
Yep.
So, training to me, training and coaching are two different things, right? One is a little bit more of a leadership role, and then it encompasses a lot more than just being in the gym and training and biomechanics. So I'm curious as to what led to that transition.
I feel like you and like a lot of other people, I made a lot of mistakes. I worked out for like say 12 years, and like not many, we couldn't really tell a difference really that much. I was a bit stronger, but a lot of it was because I just wasn't doing a lot of things very right. And I could have, if I really maximized myself when I was like 18, I could have been a lot further along for sure.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that is just me trying to tell people and show people how to do things without going through the massive amounts of trials and errors that I did, just absolute years of plateaus, all sorts of things. And when it came to the coaching, when I started to really kind of get my shit together in a sense, especially in college, people started really noticing. People started gravitating towards me. They were wanted to hang out with me. They wanted to know more about me, and just kind of became more of one of these things where people just more and more
Yeah.
wanted to know about me. Then as I got further in college, I took on more leadership roles. I did powerlifting in college.
Yep.
I took a decently leadership role as part of that community. For school, like I always was one of the, if I led a lab, I always would lead labs and stuff like that, and teach people like how to do certain ones, or how to set up equations for biomechanics, or even how to teach like nutrition, or exercise, thermogenics and stuff like that. So I was always in a position. I started to take on more position of just teaching people, because some people just got confused about it. And I feel like a lot of the stuff that we were going through in college was like a lot of things, but it's really simple. And if you can have somebody that can just really break things down and
Mhm.
give it to you on a very simple level, this stuff is really easy to digest. I feel like there was never just a lot of good things about there. Like we grew up with like forums and stuff like that. Forums are just the most toxic place where you could possibly be to try to learn information. Some are good, and then you have some are just like
For sure.
people are just all over the place with that kind of stuff. So I think leading me into coaching was just, I wanted to help people fast track them. I always thought whenever I was doing it, if I had a clone myself and how I would somebody next to me that would be like, I always thought about the future me was right next to me coaching me, like a 3 or 4 year old, 4 years advanced. Ian was sitting next to me and he was
Mhm.
telling me like, hey, do this, you should do this. Like always trying to like coach myself in a sense. So I always felt like if I had that at an earlier age, I would be a different, way further along. And so I always try to give that back, is kind of how I got
Yeah.
into coaching. I wanted to give it back and get people the no BS answer, especially with the internet and there's so much
Yeah.
information. Just get straight to the point and tell you, hey, that's shit, or hey, that's what you should be doing.
Yeah. 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 One thing that I admire about you is that you have these other interests that you're into, and you're like, you know, I don't know if I would say just as into it as bodybuilding or not. I don't know to what levels, right? But I do know that there are two levels that allow you to connect with people on things other than fitness. And it's something that I really admire because for so long I have been so one track minded in bodybuilding and fitness and learning as much as I can and doing it that I have a hard time connecting with a lot of people outside of
This.
this, right? Um, so I think that that has, led to some trials and tribulations, and I'm realizing that, and now I'm diving into things like fantasy football and stuff like that, right? So
Yeah.
um, yeah, so I started coaching because, well, there's a couple of reasons. One is that I spent a decade doing everything wrong. And from the time I was 16 to 26, I tell people all the time that I spent years training poorly. Um, it wasn't always bad. It wasn't, you know, but a lot of it wasn't that great. Most of it wasn't that great, right? Whether it be form or intensity or whatever I was doing. Um, but I also approached things in a very poor manner in that I started using PEDs before I ever nailed down nutrition because probably my sophomore year of college or my freshman year going into sophomore year, I started dating the first girl that was into fitness like I was. And her stepdad was a professional bodybuilder and he lived overseas. And so she was like, hey, if you really want to grow, like you need to be eating 5,000 calories and it needs to be, chicken and brown rice and oatmeal and egg whites. And you already know where I'm going, right? Like you already know how bad this is going to be. So,
Yeah, that's bad.
so needless to say, I was doing that, but I was using the bathroom so often that I was waddling around. Because I'm pretty certain that I gave myself salmonella, and then like at the end of the week, my I prepped all my food on Sunday for the entire week, and by the end of the week, it was so dry and gross that I would drink half a gallon of Promised Land chocolate milk to get those calories in.
To make up for it, yeah. Some
Yeah,
Sam's Club shit.
yeah. So it was just I've always had a bad digestion system anyways, and so that just exacerbated the issue. So I was like, this food thing doesn't work. Like I'm doing everything that at the time I thought I was supposed to be doing. So obviously I leaned a little bit more into the drug side of things, um, which allows me to relate to a lot of these young guys in understanding, their thought process and why they do the things they do. But another reason is that when I was 18 years old, 19 years old, I was heading off to college. It was the summer before I was heading off. I mean, I was leaving probably 2 weeks later. We had a pro that graduated high school about 4 years ahead of me, and he went pro like that same year. And he was at the gym, and we were talking, and he was like, "Man, you look good. Like I can see you have some definition and stuff like that." And I was like, "Yeah, man, I really want to compete. Maybe next year I want to put on some more muscle." And he was like, "Hey, man, I can help you." Like I was like, "Okay, great. Like I have no idea what I'm doing, so please do, right?" And so I go off to college. It's probably a week or two later, and I message him on Facebook, and he's like, "Yeah, man, let me get some things together, and I'll help you out." Right? Don't hear from him for like 2 weeks. I message him again. I never hear from him again. I still see him around occasionally, but that instance makes me wonder where would I be today in bodybuilding had he have shown me? Had he have shown me even the basics, right? Of like how to build an actual diet, anything, right?
Yeah.
Um, I'd probably be a lot further along than I am right now. So I got into coaching for the same reason you did, to help people bypass all of the garbage that I went through,
Hmm.
all of the trial and error. Um, if you'll just listen, I promise you, I can guide you down a path down that's much smoother, and we'll get the results much faster. So
Yeah, that's you brought up a pretty interesting point there with that when you're 18, you said, right? 18 when that pro and you wanted to work with this guy and this guy just, I guess, ghosted
yeah,
you, right, in a sense. There was an instance with a coach that that a lot of people around here know. In 2018, I had to ask. I was like, "Hey, like, I want like some help." Like, he was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Sure." Like, "Yeah, I'll help you out," and all this kind of stuff. Very well respected name, just to say that in that
yeah.
sense. And he's
Local
like, "Yeah,
guy.
you want to?" Yeah, you want to? He's like, "All right, you meet me. We'll come here at the gym, and meet me at this time." I showed up that time. It wasn't there, and then
Yeah,
I messaged him, and he ghosted me for like 3 or 4 days. And it finally came up with some random excuse as to why it was, and then like he wasn't gonna help me after all. And I think at that point, that when I was like, all right, let's see what I can do. I'm gonna make
yeah,
sure this guy knows my name by the end of my journey of doing this. He's gonna know
yeah,
exactly who I am. So I think that's one of the things. But again, maybe this guy could have helped me. I think in retrospect, looking back on, it's probably a good idea he didn't. But
yeah. I'm really glad he
these are
didn't.
all lessons. Yeah, there's all of these lessons that we can learn, and
Yeah,
obviously, if I wouldn't be where I'm at today, but
100%.
I think that brings us both to this point. It's just like that's why we're here, is because we've gone through these things. We've had bad
Yeah,
times, good times. We could have a whole podcast episode about us just talking about shit we did in high school and shit we did
yeah,
during college to like put on size. Like I did some fucked up things. Like
for sure.
I mean, I didn't finish PEDs until I was 27, but I did everything to the mix. I was like, okay, you have to have brown rice. I'll eat brown rice, and I hated it. I was like, there's no way. It was but back then. It was like brown rice and like cottage cheese.
Yeah, no
Like
salt. Like,
these were like the taboo things like to do, and I was like, grit. So it's like, okay, I'm going to try all this shit out. It doesn't have to be like that.
Yeah.
None of this has to be like that.
Yeah.
But back then, that was just the way that like you thought things
Yep.
would pan out for you. I mean, creatine loading. I used to do creatine loading. I remember I just mixed it in water, like 20 grams of creatine, and I would drink it like for like 5 days. And I was like, God, this tastes like it's horrible. My weight would jump up, and I would be like a bloated mess. I was like, damn, this is working. No, this is awesome. I was like 15 at the time.
Yeah.
But there's tons of those that we can kind of get into because I think we do have a lot of experience for sure. Like we've both been at this for, you said 13, 14.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Probably got really into it when I was 13 as well. So,
Yeah.
up on 15, 20 years. So,
Yeah. I mean, in reality, I've come to the conclusion that like I wasn't ready. Like if he had helped me and I would have made a ton of progress, like
no.
truth be told, back then I cared about two things. I cared about getting huge and I cared about getting laid. And that was it. And it would have exacerbated the issue, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it just would have made it worse. I would have had an ego about myself. I already know, right? I would have had an ego about myself and I wouldn't be the man that's for sure. So
Yeah.
it happens for a reason.
Yeah, it all happens for a reason. I mean, there's a lot of growing up I feel like I've had to do to be where I'm at, to be the bodybuilder and the coach that I am today, that it just wouldn't have happened at any earlier of a time in my life. It's just one of these things that life just goes in whatever direction it's supposed to go, and you'll bounce around a few times, but it'll
Yeah.
always, I feel like, in my opinion, it'll always lead you to where you're supposed to go. It just might not be on the timeline or the
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
might think that get you there appropriately.
Yeah.
So I do think I do agree with that as well.
Yeah. Well, why don't we talk about why we're doing this podcast, right? Like, what's the point? Why are we meeting? You know,
I think it's so a lot of it is kind of the things we talked about, right? It's just like we want to educate people, we want to teach people, we also want to get our voices heard as well.
yeah,
But we also are people that like we listen to podcasts on our own. Like you drive a lot, you listen to a lot of podcasts,
mhm,
whatever. Especially if I'm in prep and I'm doing walks and a bunch of cardio, I'm listening, 3 or 4 podcasts, and it's just another way of just getting out information and for people just to hear more about us and more about
yeah,
things they might not get in a one-on-one conversation in the
yeah,
gym or through a DM or something like that. They can put this on, and I think the whole idea is for us just to have these conversations, make nothing crazy long episodes, where people feel like they have to like listen for an hour and a half or 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Sure, maybe one day we'll get there, but I do think having these small episodes where people can just get an idea and get a sense of our personality, because I do feel like a lot in bodybuilding, there's not a lot of personality that's exposed until you start getting into podcasts and you're like, okay, that guy's not just a fucking meathead,
yeah,
or he's not just a strong dude. Like this guy actually has like shit going on in his life, and he's actually a pretty genuine guy. So I think
yeah.
that's why we
Not only
started.
that, but long form gives us the opportunity to expand on our thoughts and our opinions on things, right?
Mhm.
And so we don't just get to put on our personality, but when we're posting on Instagram and we're creating educational content, um, we're making statements, right? There's nuance to everything, and in long form conversation, we can have that. And then somebody that is watching our stuff now has an understanding of the way that we think. And so when they see something that we post that's like, well, that's a little bit black and white, but then they understand who we are and how we think. And then now you can start to understand what I'm actually talking about, right? So it just provides more value in that context. And I think that's the ultimate goal here, right? Is to provide value to anybody that it can. But not only that, I also think that it's an opportunity for us to learn from one another, and have more of those open discussions that we can't always have at the gym without being interrupted, um, or
Sure.
worrying about who's going to chime in that we don't care to.
Sure. Yeah. Of course.
Um, but yeah, I just feel like it opens things up more for understanding, how we think and how we coach people, how we manage clients, right? And how we approach our own bodybuilding. I mean, I think for the most part we do a lot of things similarly. We have a lot of similar thoughts, and I'm sure the more we dig into the weeds of things, we're going to find that we have some small differing opinions, which would make for good conversation, right?
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
but yeah, 30-minute episodes moving forward, um, and the intention is for us to just push on. So,
Yeah, I think with like having these kind of podcasts and stuff like that, it also just opens up our brains as well and wants us to dive down into more information and
yeah,
things that we maybe been putting off because we have a lot of opinions and things that like a lot of coaching is not like some of it's taboo or some people don't talk about, and also people maybe in our area want to like hear from certain things or hear from certain talking points. And so I think that like having these and just having this extra room of dialogue, like you said, it just breaks down. Like you create a post and you're just like bringing up a lagging body part. That could literally
yeah,
be a whole episode where instead of you we just
yeah,
breaking it down like
exactly.
how to do that, like instead of just being like yeah like do more volume there, or like
Yeah, because
up with case studies and scenarios where people can
yeah,
look
yeah,
at it and be like, oh, like that applies to me, or this doesn't apply to me, or whatever that may be.
yeah. And what you're talking about is knowledge versus application, right?
Sure.
And knowledge without the understanding of application can be dangerous. Um, it doesn't matter how much you know, the application is always, it can be different, right? And so if we can explain some of that application and allow people to understand it better, that provides value, right? So, all right, well, I guess that about does it for today.
Yeah.
Um, I will stop this now.